And we are live, everybody. Are we here?
Yes,
Very
we
good.
Yes, hello.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the panel on BIPOC superheroes and Myra in DC. I'm your moderator, author Alicia McCullough, and I write superheroes, supernatural thrillers, and huntresses for readers who love strong Black female leads. Tonight, I have some amazing panelists, and I'll let them introduce themselves. And let's start with Cece, because he's first in my window there.
Hello, my name is Cece KK. I write superhero fiction, space opera, and I'll probably be dabbling in urban fantasy and supernatural sometime in the future. My main series is the Pantheon Saga. It's on book 6 with a couple of novellas and soon to be book 7.
All right, we want to go to Krishan.
Hello, all. Krishan Keller-Hanna here. I am the creator of the Shaman States America universe, which is monster hunting for the rest of us. And it covers the gambit of all experiences, from the queer experience, from the BIPOC experience. And it's absolutely fun. I love it. And I'm adapting those into comics. And I'm also the editor-at-large at Constant Hustle Comics, where Viction Bellium is coming through with, I love talking about this, Black superheroes, Black empowerment without the Black trauma, whole families.
All right now.
Absolutely. And joy and power because they have power, not because they're fighting a trauma. And we're going to be talking more about that today, and I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Michelle, would you like to tell everybody about your history?
Yes, of course. Hi, I'm Michelle Monarres, and I am a Mexican-American author. I write sci-fi and superhero stories that bring my Hispanic heritage to American settings. I am the author of the Refurbished Saga. I published my debut novel, book 1 of that saga, last year. And it's all about immigrants, basically X-Men from the perspective of immigrants.
I like it.
Nice.
All right, Danny, you want to go next?
I write superhero prose, young adult and urban fantasy. In addition to that, I review media and critique it in terms of superhero movies, television shows, offer my opinions on those as well. I've written for various publications too. In addition to that, I do activism stuff too. So diversity and, Black empowerment, POC empowerment, LGBTQ, all that stuff matters to me. So definitely here for, the empowerment without the trauma. So that definitely resonated. So glad to be here.
All right, and Krista.
Hi, I'm Krista Tomlinson, and I'm a romance author. I am currently writing a superhero romance series called The Arch City Guardians. It's set in St. Louis, where I'm from, and it's a very diverse team of heroes that are there. So I try to include, lots of different types of characters regarding their ethnicity and their sexuality and genders and things like that. So it's a very a diverse series. The first book is out. Second one will be coming out soon. And I also have a smaller series that's just like a bunch of short story superheroes called the Heartthrob Heroes, which I just kind of throw those up whenever I get an idea that I know I won't have time to put into a full novel. So I just go ahead and release that as a novella. So those are the 2 superhero stories that I have going right now.
Fantastic.
And Alicia, you might be getting that since everyone's kind of selling their series a little more and some of the stuff. The main character in my superhero series is basically Pacific. The idea is basically Pacific Islander Superboy. And it takes place in a fictionalized San Luis Obispo County, where there's actually a major city there in between San Francisco and LA. And it's got diversity up the wahoo in terms of it's basically kind of like the way I grew up in LA in terms of the diversity and the different types of people and whatnot. So,
all right, I like it. Yeah. Okay, everybody, are we ready to get this going?
Yes.
We got some discussions.
Let's do it.
So
Oh yeah.
we were talking about my age, and yes, I am 51 years old, and I'll be turning 52 in September, for which I will dress up like a superhero this year.
Yes. Yes.
So I'll probably
Yes.
date. I am
Wow.
definitely dating myself. But when I was a kid, I loved to watch the Brown Hornet on Fat Albert and Apache Chief on Super Friends, right? So both of those characters helped me to have a sense of pride and identity. Can you guys tell me who the first BIPOC superhero you identified with was and what impact that had on your identity? Do you know what? Let's start with Krista.
Oh, hi. Okay. So, I watched. I didn't really read comics as a kid because there wasn't anywhere where there was access to them for me. So I came to superheroes from cartoons. So mine were mostly Batman the Animated Series and the X-Men animated series. Those were the two main things that I watched as a kid. And so I didn't really see too many on either of those shows except for Storm. And at the time, since they're not explicit on the cartoon, I don't think with her ethnicity, I thought she was South Asian. Because there was one episode where they show her as a kid, and she's like in her hometown in Landland, where she, they first show the brick wall falling on her, everything, and I just assumed that was somewhere in South Asia because she was light skinned, like as a what was I, like 10 or something. I didn't realize that she could have been from Africa at that time, so I didn't know that until I was older. And then there was a time where I really just wasn't really into paying attention to superheroes and everything. So by the time I came back into it in my late 20s, that's when I started to see, the characters that were out there, Vixen and Bumblebee. And, those were the characters that I really started to say, oh, look, it's exciting to see them on there. Because now they're visible and I can see them. And Black Panther, which before the movie I recognized from the comics, because I had kind of started reading comics by that point. So it was to me it was more of I didn't get to grow up with them, but as an adult I got to see, okay, they're there and that's exciting. And also be aware, since you're more aware of things as an adult, that we definitely should have more and be able to see more. And what can we do to get more out there? So unfortunately, I didn't have that. I didn't get to grow up with, oh, they look like me. I missed that whole thing, and so I didn't really get to experience that until I was an adult. So.
Yeah, I was excited to learn that Storm was a princess. A West African
goddess,
princess,
a
right?
goddess,
Right?
goddess.
Yes.
Yeah. She is actually an Omega level mutant. She has killed gods. She has stood up there and removed the atmosphere from the earth to suffocate somebody.
In fact, with other Omega level mutants recently,
she's a latent mystic that rivals that of the Scarlet Witch.
And what ended up just happening is that her and Magneto and some other people, they literally just like terraform Mars, and so now it's like a mutant accepting planet.
Yes. So let's hear from Michelle. Michelle, do you have someone that you identified with?
Yes. Well, my first BIPOC superhero was pretty much Static Shock. I grew up in Mexico, and we didn't get a lot of, all the exposure of other cartoons that were, or comic books that were mainstream in the United States. But I got to see Static through morning cartoons, and I thought it was really cool. Like, he was younger than all the other heroes that I had seen. Like, I had been exposed to Batman and Superman, maybe a little bit of Wonder Woman back then, and he was younger, and I really liked the fact that he was a person of color, because I don't know, I hadn't seen a person of color, a Black young boy or young man, being the center of his own story, right? He wasn't like the quirky best friend, or he wasn't a sidekick. He was the hero, and that resonated a lot with me.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. But I think I kind of share that with Krista, that until I was an adult, I wasn't able to truly identify with somebody from my own ethnicity, because Jaime Reyes, Blue Beetle, and I know that he has his comic books now, but I didn't know that he existed until I was an adult. And yeah, so he's Mexican American and he's from El Paso, and I was born in El Paso, so that was really truly special to get to see him. You know, he was in Young Justice. I think the first time that I see him, and it was like, wait a minute, who is this guy? I want to know more about them. It was really nice, and I think that influenced my writing and my whole writing career. Like I want to make other people feel that it was a kind of special pride that I don't know how to describe. Like to see him among the Robins and Starfires of the world, I was really excited. So yeah,
marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go to Denny.
For me, it was definitely Storm. I am a hardcore Storm fanboy. I was maybe 8 when I was introduced to her with the comic book pilot. The cartoon pilot. It was like Trials of the X-Men. I think it came on after Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, which shout out to Iceman and Firestar. They were X-Men alumni. And then Iceman, we now know he's playing for the winning team. That was actually special to me too. He's being him being gay, because that resonated for me. For me, Storm resonated because it's usually black characters they're usually the subservient, they're sidekicks, or they don't have power. They're not that powerful. And she had the powers to control weather. She was regal, she was majestic, and she controlled the respect of her, non-black peers. And I'd never seen anything like that. And then when the other things she's accomplished, and then plus with X-Men being based on the civil rights movement and the testament to black excellence and its diversity, especially during the 90s, with heroes that were Latino, Asian, women, boys, girls, young, and it's like that diversity. It was like that really inspired me. And a special shout out also goes to Alyssa Maza from Gargoyles, because that was also one of the first times I saw a black and indigenous.
She's half Nigerian. Yeah, she's half Nigerian. Yeah, I remember that.
Right. So being someone who is part of indigenous descent, and also I've always identified as black excellence personified or Wakandan before the movie, because I'm like, that's how proud we never get to see something like that. So that was really special to see too, that our cultures were celebrated, and seeing that as a young child, that was inspiring for me.
Right. Okay, tell us, Krishan.
Well, as part of the 50-Year-Old Club again, the character that I first experienced was Super Stretch and Micro Woman. And if you remember them, okay, for all you youngins out there, let me explain how cartoons worked back in the 70s.
Okay.
For a lot of the cartoons, it was snippets, those little 9 to 13 minutes. They would collect them all and show them in package. And this show particularly was Tarzan and the Super 7. And it would have a Tarzan adventure, and then it would have several other superhero adventures. And one of them was Super Stretch and Micro Woman, which was an African-American couple who was together, who were smart, they were scientists. This was the result of experiments on themselves, not trauma, and they worked well and were in love. And at the end, they even kissed. And you have to understand, right? They were just like, mwah. And you have to understand that in the 70s, I think that they stopped running in 1980 or so. Seeing an intact, affluent, intelligent African Americans who are also superpowered.
Yes.
And just in a culture where the only other black person in television, movies, and in comics were villains, the nurse who sat up there and kissed the superhero and then died, or even worse, the nurse who kissed the superhero and her brother was the bad guy and she died and he died. That was all you saw for a very long time. The Storms and all of those characters notwithstanding, it was amazing to me because it was a middle-class family. And then going on, you do see Storm, who is once again a goddess, right? And Black Panther and Luke Cage, who was pretty much Doc Savage. She was the man with the fist, boom, 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 right? And they were brought in, but there wasn't a lot of black female other than Storm. Where you saw the black female in comics was the power behind the veil. And I'm sorry, not just Black women, but women of color. You're usually the power behind it. Your Talia Coors and your is it Amanda Waller?
Yes,
Yes,
Amanda Waller.
Amanda Waller.
For Suicide Squad, yes, Amanda
Right,
Waller.
Yeah.
And
The villains, yeah.
Yeah, and for the life of me, I want to remember the name of the woman who helped Batman after Bane broke his back.
Oh, the Dr. Chandra, what's her name? I know Dr. Chandra.
Somebody, I remember her too. Do you
Yeah, I
remember
remember
that Jane Kennedy played like Nubia and Wonder Woman?
Yeah,
There was like 1 or 2 episodes. She was like a detective or something. I remember that.
Yes.
It wasn't that ending.
But you had to look for them.
Yeah.
Chandra
You'd
King
be happy to
Salver.
see them.
Chandra King Salvin, that's her name.
Yes, that's where I started looking, and that's kind of what shaped my fiction, because the women in the shaman states of America are not only out there fighting the monsters, they're also the powers behind the veil.
The power brokers.
They're the power brokers, and to look at them, you're just like, oh well. She's Black and she's wearing her bonnet and everything, and she's on the phone sitting up there trying to negotiate hunters killing a dragon. 200-300 miles, right? Because it's unassuming, and she's actually invisible unless people put eyes on her. And those are the things I love, and those are the things I learned because of the characterization I saw from 7 years old to now.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, CC, what you got?
Okay, so for me, I can attest to what Krista was saying, where when I was younger, I was just, Black nerds were not really looked well upon when I was a kid. They were considered Steve Urkel, and since I was kind of skinnier when I was younger, that's what I got compared to. So I didn't really. For me, it was just kind of looking at things that I liked, and I'd say for me, it was X-Men was a big thing for me in terms of just inspiration. But I'd say probably the Black superhero who had the most influence on me was probably Benjamin Sisko. Because Benjamin Sisko, a single Black father in space, who was the lead character of a show, a science fiction show. And it was just, and the thing, for once, he was shown to be a good father. You see a Black man who's a good father. He's there, even though, his wife died, he's grieving, he's a widower as well. And so he had a huge influence on one of the first characters, like my first book series. That was a huge influence in terms of what the character was and how he kind of, just his whole arc in many ways. And even though as much as I love the X-Men as a whole, I'd say Bishop. I really like Bishop, even though they kind of destroyed him. But I liked when he first came in, he was this badass. Like anytime I saw him in the comic books, I don't count how he talked in the animated series because I thought it sucked. But the way he talked in the comic books, I just thought of Michael Dorn's voice in my head all the time because that just made the most sense. Right? And even just the way he talked, I'm like, dude, that sounds like the way Warford talked. It's awesome. Right. So for me, that was a big thing. But I'd say in terms of seeing more people who looked like me, it wasn't until I was an adult when that really resonated with me more. Because when I was a kid, I was just like, I like this. This is cool. It was great when you saw diversity, but it wasn't really something that drove me. I became more cognizant of it as I became an adult. But I'd say Benjamin Sisko, who's probably the most underrated captain in Star Trek, and definitely Bishop. And I also thought was really cool was another underrated hero was Forge. Forge, who was a Native American, and he basically, even though he didn't have the flashiest power, he didn't have claws, he didn't have blasters, but he could make anything. He could build anything. He was an inventor in the purest sense. And when he came to the height of his powers, he could merge that part of himself with the shamanic part of his self. And he become a truly powerful force to be reckoned with. So, and him and Storm got together at one point. So there's that.
All right, let's go to our next question. So I've been in several discussions where I've heard, people say it's more important for characters to just be superheroes first and maybe be BIPOC second. And I know you guys have some thoughts on this. So
I feel some kind of way about this.
We have opinions.
Well, I just talked, so someone else go first.
All right. I'm going to say this out loud. That statement is only correct if you are the reader. All right, because that goes for any superhero character, right? It is about the super didgeridoo when you're reading, right? And then you learn more about them. If you are a writer, if you are a publisher, that goes the other way around, because you should know, if you don't already know, that their experiences in their life up until that point and that first panel, everything informs who they are, what they do, why they're doing it, why they didn't just sit up there, hang the tights up and go home. All of that informs that person. And when you create a character, you must start with that. And don't say, oh, it won't sell. There's a thing is that it does sell. There's more than enough evidence that it sells. But what they don't want to admit is that it is harder, because they have not put in the time and infrastructure, right, to do these things, to make it so that BIPOC writers and inkers and colorists and artists are in there making informed decisions, because you haven't taken the time and the energy. Yes, it will be more difficult. And frankly, folks don't want to put in that effort.
All right, somebody else got something to say.
How do you follow that up?
I agree with her I agree with Krishan in terms of it informs how you create the character, because I'm sure, I don't need to tell anyone here, but I'll just say it for the viewers at home, is that unless you state it explicitly, at least in the first couple chapters, unless they have a name that's very specific, Western literature, you're going to just automatically think that they're white.
Yes,
that's just how it is.
So right.
And so you need to make sure that that's explicitly stated. Obviously, I feel that while you want to make sure that the character is, hey, there's representation, there's inclusion, that's always key. But I think most importantly, and this is the problem that we've seen on mainstream media, on television, on movies, is that we need to make sure that the readers have a reason to care about them beyond the skin color. Because if that's it, then you're actually doing more damage. Because, okay, I'm supposed to care, this is pandering, it'll feel like pandering. So you want to make sure that, hey, I have a reason to root for this character of color beyond just their skin color. And also, I love the way you said, Krishan, you said it so eloquently earlier, making it trauma-free, this is a character who we're not supposed to care about them because of their trauma. We care about them because of their story. We care about them because of what they're bringing to the table. What is their goal? What do they want? What is their agency? And what is their journey? Obviously you don't want to make them super special where nothing hurts them. We want to see them struggle, but we want that struggle to not just be that generational struggle that we've seen, that slavery porn or whatever. So I think that it's that tightrope that you need to walk, particularly as a person of color, where you need to tell a compelling story. You need to tell a compelling story with a person of color. And then you need to obviously just make sure that when you get that story out there, it just, you want people wanting more. You bring the readers and they want more from what you're telling, so that it not only opens the door for more for that writer, but for other writers, because it's like you're almost kind of bringing people up. It's like a rising tide lifts all boats. I know Craig Martell says that a lot of times, but sometimes he's right. He's right, and especially when it comes to this genre, when it comes to superheroes, where it's already a niche genre, and then it's already smaller when you have BIPOC. When it comes to BIPOC heroes, it's that much important that when you get it on, when you have to tell the story of a character, that you make sure that readers care and that they want more. It's like, ooh, I like this. I want to see other writers. That gets them interested in other writers out there and what stories they have to tell with their characters. So,
Krista, you want to say something, Krista?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go next. What I was thinking is, for when I saw that question, is that the only person, or the only type of person that doesn't matter to, who says that, do the superhero first and worry about everything else later, are people who already have the representation set in stone. They've never had to worry about it. Whereas if you're someone who you haven't seen yourself, well, no matter what it is about you, represented, when you see a superhero who has whatever that is, that brown skin, that black skin, that curly hair. When you see that, you're immediately going to be like, oh wow, let me check that out, because that matters to you because you've never seen it before. Whereas if you're someone who already has yourself represented all the time, then you just want the story. So that's the same thing. Like when I hear readers say, "Oh, I don't care about who's in the story. I just want a good story." Well, of course you don't care, because you're already represented on the page all the time. So why would you care? But when you're not represented on the page, that is something that's going to draw you in. And of course, like you both were saying, that's not what's going to keep you there. You're not going to keep reading the story if it's crap just because they're black or they're Japanese or they're a woman. You're not going to keep reading the story if it's a bad story. But that is what's going to bring you in. So that does matter. And like you were saying, you do have to build that into their story from the beginning, because if it's not, then you might wind up creating a character. And I saw something kind of flash over there in the private chat where you're creating a character that's this kind of just a white character with a brown name and face on it. Because you haven't really thought about what parts of their culture would go into that, hero. So for example, just something super, super tiny, if you have, since my Hero Academia is on the brain, because I'm going to be in that panel tomorrow. If you were to write those superheroes coming home and walking in the house with their shoes on, they wouldn't do that because they're in Japan, so they would take their shoes off, right? So those are the things that you have to build into that character. So it does matter when you're creating that character, what their ethnicity is and all of those things that people don't see when you're always used to the 20-year-old white male American hero. So I think it does definitely matter. It just, people who haven't received representation see it first. People who haven't have to be brought around to it.
Got you. Does anyone else have anything else for this topic, or you want me to move on to the next question? All right, let's move on.
I can add to. I was pretty much going to co-sign what everyone else said, that this was definitely, it's character is story and story is character. So when someone's like superhero first, it's usually the paradigm of white being the default. And to go back to what CC was saying, you usually have to specify it and almost have to be like, I'm black, y'all, I'm black, y'all, I'm black, y'all, in order to do it. But one of the biggest compliments I got some years back for a writing critique group I was in, I wrote a horror story which featured two gay leads. One of them was coming back to haunt his dead lover, and you find out there was some major murder and some sinister crap going on. And one of the people who reviewed it, he said, I've never read a story with two gay characters before. He's like, it's not my sort of thing, but he was like, this was a great story, and it easily could have worked with a heterosexual couple, which you see all the time, but it happened to be gay. And to me, it was like, no matter what the ethnicity is or whether they're universal truths or universal elements that people can relate to, he's just as popular with as many white fans as he is black fans, if not more so, because if you have a good character, it can connect to anyone. And I think when you write a character and you want to make them universal, they can appeal to any kind of audience. There are many non-black superheroes of color who resonate with me because I can relate to their experience being a person of color. Or Midnighter, who's my second favorite character. He's a gay white superhero, but he's awesome and an unapologetic badass and puts Batman to shame. So it's like people can relate to that too. So yeah, it can work. It's just you have to put yourself to make them a great character.
Okay, I like that. All right. So several months ago, I was working on a series of blog posts on Black women superheroes, and I wanted to kind of do something special or unique. So I put out there for people to tell me what their fandom was. Tell me who your favorite Black woman superhero was. And needless to say, I didn't get a lot of responses like to the survey part, but I got a lot of inboxes from people, and they were all struggling with, there's Storm. And when I did the research, I did find others. There's about 15 other Black women superheroes out there, but they, in some ways, they're rather obscure. Like, people have to remember who they are. And I guess what I'm saying is, from you guys' perspective, do you feel that BIPOC superheroes are rather obscure, or I wouldn't say non-existent, but is there something that's not quite right there?
Here's what I think is when it comes to BIPOC superheroes, and it comes to original BIPOC superheroes, those are rare. I think one of the things that I want to see more of is the original ones, because especially in Marvel and DC, everything is like a snow globe. They shake things up and then everything settles back to normal. So they'll give, like, say, Sam Wilson the Captain America thing. But the problem is that he's living in the shadow of Steve Rogers. I'd rather Sam Wilson be Falcon and not be Captain American. I think it's just having those original IPs is more important. I'd love to see more of those, because let them establish their own legacy and not just taking somebody else's and like writing off someone else's.
Yes.
Because that's just kind of how I feel. I feel it's better to see.
Yeah, I thought they were gonna make him Patriot. I wasn't sure.
Patriot, you did see Patriot, but it wasn't going to be him.
I mean, I'm surprised. I think because I remember when Michelle brought up Jaime Reyes, and that's one of the few that they actually did. That's one of the few they didn't change back, because for the longest time it was like Ted Kord was Blue Beetle, and they actually stuck with that one, which was great. So that's a rarity, and he's actually kind of eclipsed Ted Kord, because Ted Kord is kind of, pardon the pun, vanilla. But I feel that it's important to start seeing original IPs. That's the one.
Yes, I think I agree with that too. And kind of piggybacking on that idea of Captain America, it's America Chavez. It's Miss America, and she's from the Latinx perspective, she's a woman, but also she doesn't have her own flag, right? She's also taking the legacy or the name of Captain America in some sort of way. Even her outfit, it's really an echo of that. So yeah. Yeah. From the Latinx perspective, I can say that I feel the same way as Alicia does. I can't think from the top of my head of any Latinx superheroes. I mean, America Chavez, Jaime Reyes, Miles Morales, and that's it. Like, we're not out there among, among the Captain Americans and the Iron Mans of the world. We're not out there.
What about Farrell? What about Farrell? I know she's obscure.
They are all obscure.
Yeah, I'm digging it deep.
Several.
And then there's Ironheart and what's her name? Riri. What's her name?
Riri Williams. Williams. Yeah, she takes on Iron Man's thing.
Right. She's taking over Iron Man.
Yes.
And that's the thing. It feels. This is going to be a three-parter, and I'm going to rope in this question in the chat into it as well. There are very few original BIPOC characters because they're afraid they can't market them. So what they do is they attach them to a star of another superhero. Yes. Talking about Captain America and Sam Wilson, talking about Miles Morales with Spider-Man, talking about Riri Williams and Ironheart and Ms. Marvel. Is it Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel, or
it's Captain? Wait,
it's Ms. Marvel.
Ms. Marvel. Yes.
Actually, Ms. Marvel. That's Kamala Khan. Actually,
yeah, it's Kamala Khan,
and that was formerly Carol Danvers.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
They attach it because they don't want it to be. They don't want it to be because it's not marketable.
They're taking the safe way out.
Right, taking the safe way out. And I often hear, well, I don't want to limit my character to a specific ethnicity, and the problem is in the sentence itself. Because your solution to limiting a character to a certain
preaching.
Go on.
The way your solution to limiting a character to a certain ethnicity is to limit it to Caucasian.
Yes.
And the question is
real.
Why I don't want to limit my character. What that means is that I don't want to take the time to tell a story.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Or
take
to
the
find
time
out how to. Yes.
or how to tell a story that takes all these wonderful things that makes them this ethnicity and this particular person and
Yeah.
makes them real to people, because that takes effort. It's really easy to put draws on a white dude and send them out flying somewhere. It's very easy.
Yes.
Mhm.
You know, people don't really talk about it, but wasn't the creator of Black Panther a white man? If
It was
I
Stan Lee.
remember
It was
correctly.
Stan Lee.
He's
Yeah.
got own
Stan Lee.
voices,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
And it's funny because
Yeah.
Own
it
voices.
actually happened I think either a couple months or a couple of years before the creation of the actual Black Panthers. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was.
Oh.
All right,
They
so
took
let's
the name.
go on. Let's go on with Marvel. All right,
Yeah.
so Marvel fans refer to the first Iron Man as putting Marvel MCU back on the map because it made that $585 million at the box office.
Mhm.
But I'm old enough to remember when Blade put the Marvel franchise back on the map when it made $131 million in 1998, right? So you also have Black Panther, and of course, poor Chadwick is gone now. But you know, you wonder with all of these movies like that were making this blockbuster money and putting Marvel on the map. Why is it that? How do I say it? Why is it that we aren't, or BIPOC leads aren't heading up these major motion pictures or being a part of those big story arcs in comics? What is that really about?
Because we're
Well, I'll tell you.
not, I think it's because we're not in the map of creators. Like, we are not up there with those creators. We're starting barely to appear on that map of people that write comics and that write movies, but we're not up there. So that's why it doesn't happen.
Yeah, we're not there. We're not there yet.
Not at the
And to
table.
piggyback on what you're saying, and to piggyback on what you're saying, I'm going to go a little deeper here. I'd say Blade did one further than putting Marvel on the map. It put comic book movies on the map, back on the map, because
Yes.
a lot of them were a joke up until that point, and a lot of people look at X-Men and the first Spider-Man of the three Spider-Man series that have been out there, but it was Blade in '98 that really held it down and was so accurate, and thanks to Wesley Snipes' great portrayal. But going back to what you're saying about a lot of these BIPOC films, I think the thing with Hollywood is, Hollywood is a weird place. So they'll do one thing and then they'll pat themselves on the back. Look what we did, Black Panther. Oh my God, we're great.
Oh yeah, no, right.
And I'm going to give you one better. Another reason why they're not lining up as much as they could is it's financial, not domestic or even other countries' financial. It's China financial. Because remember what they did to John Boyega in a lot of the posters.
Yes.
They minimized him. He was all huge, large, and in charge.
He was.
And all of a sudden, China, he becomes Scott Lang. He's like, how did he become Ant-Man? I didn't know he was Ant-Man. How'd that happen? And so because that's such, and because
is
that's
that
such
where
a large,
colorism comes into play?
Oh, yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Yes.
Yes.
In China, and that's the thing. In China, it's like they minimized him because they're just like, oh, well, black's not going to sell in China. So that's what they're thinking.
That's what they say.
Yeah. So, and it's the second largest, and you see Hollywood is kind of, pardon my French, prostituted itself out to China in order to get their movies up there, because China is the CCP is very selective of what movies they do, and there's certain restrictions that they put on. So I think that has a lot to do with it.
And an international box office will save your movie.
Yes, it will.
Right.
Look at Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim.
Oh,
that's the only reason Pacific Rim got a
let's
sequel.
not look at Pacific Rim, please.
No, but that's the reason why it got a sequel, because it made $100 million in China.
That is correct. But still.
No, I see what you mean.
I think another problem too is the fact that Hollywood moves so slow. So if you think about how when the MCU really first started to take off, everyone kept saying, "Okay, where's Black Widow's movie? Where's Black Widow's movie? Where's Black Widow's movie?" And where she gets it after the entire main arc is already over. Oh wait, we got a Black Widow movie, and now we've done women, and we're so cool. So they took all that time to get to Black Panther, and so now it might be like another 10 years before they're like, okay, now now we've got another, brown and diverse. I mean, obviously we've got, I don't know, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, Shang-Chi, I think is coming. So like, hopefully it's moving a little bit faster this time, but like, they do one small thing and then they wait and see how it's going to go, but they've already got 10 movies already in the pipeline. So now they've got to wait your turn again until they get, until they get to that point where they feel comfortable. So, it's a thing where we always have to be proven first. They can't just make the movie. You got to prove that superheroes can do well. Then you have to prove that a brown superhero can do well, and then you have to prove that another one can do well. Okay, now we can include it in the mainstream of the pantheon of all these superhero movies. There's so many hoops that we have to jump through first. So that's why it's going to take so long before we really start to see just like, more just out there just on a regular basis, and not as putting us into someone else's position, like you were saying, with taking over for Iron Man or Captain America.
And to piggyback off real quick on what Krista's saying, there was a huge, not letting anyone else, all the other people in Marvel off the hook or Disney, but there was also a huge internal roadblock within Marvel that was preventing a lot of like women characters from getting the forefront, from people of color. And it wasn't until Kevin Feige moved out from under that roadblock and started answering directly to Alan Horn and Bob Iger, that's when he had a lot more freedom in terms of what he could do and who could be in his films. Without naming this person's name. So
very interesting. So we kind of talked a little bit about movies. So let's switch hats a little bit and talk about DC and talk about some of these shows that are coming out. So I know they have the reboot of Kung Fu. I've seen Trickster. Then you've got Batwoman, and of course they're releasing doing something with Batwing. And I know I'm a Black Lightning fan. Sometimes I am. Sometimes I get tired of Black Lightning because there's a lot of trauma in Black Lightning.
There's a lot of black superheroes with lightning powers.
Yes, and and then you've got They're gonna spin off Painkiller, and I was hoping. Okay, it's not okay. So I was kind of hoping they would do like Thunder or somebody else. All to say, there's a lot of these new shows that are kind of coming out, and I don't know that if they're marketing them as well, that people really know about them. And then my fear is then if people don't get a chance to watch them or see them, or they don't know that they're out there, then they'll just evaporate or won't be there. So I just wonder what you guys think about DC's TV shows.
I mean, I don't really like them. That's what I think. I think I don't really like them because they're weird. I don't know. Their execution is just weird, and it feels uncomfortable. Right? Yes.
I feel that with the DC, the Arrowverse. I felt that the first couple of years were good. The first couple of years, the first couple seasons, and it's kind of really fallen off, especially since Arrow ended and Flash has just become ridiculous, all about love and empowerment. It's just like, dude, I want to see you fight speedsters. Come on. And I'd say the one good show they have going right now is Superman and Lois, but that's another discussion. But I agree with you in terms of like, there's a little too much trauma in the characters of color. There always has to be some type of thing. There's always like some missing father. There's always like they have street upbringing or something like that. Just like, can you just have them, like one of them be a Huxtable?
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you, I gotta say this because my favorite Black Lightning character is Lala. I want to see Lala.
Lala was great.
I want to see his TV series, right?
Yes,
it's probably
why
wrong, right?
can't BIPOC superheroes be silly? Like Flash.
Yes.
Why can't they be silly?
Yes.
We need that levity too, right? We get it.
Yeah, that was my problem with Black Lightning. Was I definitely I've kind of fallen off in all of the CW shows, but I did fall off of Black Lightning a little earlier than I did probably for the others, because like you were saying, it's so tied into Black pain and trauma, and it's just like I don't want that in my superhero shows. I mean, call me shallow if you want, but I don't want that in my superhero shows. That's just not what I'm looking for. And sometimes it can just feel so doggone heavy. You know, it's like, I don't want to be seeing this happen on the news and then I go to escape with my superheroes and I see it there again. It's like, I'm here for a good time and y'all are ruining that. That's
Supergirl,
why.
Supergirl.
Right.
Supergirl's the same thing.
See, it's too much. It feels too heavy and it makes it hard. I feel like I have to gird myself to sit down and watch it sometimes, and so that's kind of why I fell off for that. But another problem I think is just in the not in the marketing on from the show side, and then from the fan interaction. So I didn't start watching the Arrowverse until I think 2 or 3 years ago. I think I started watching it the year before Arrow was about to end. But I'm on Twitter constantly, and I always saw the Arrow stuff constantly on my Twitter feed. I hardly ever saw anything for Black Lightning. So, and I watch Batwoman now, and I love Batwoman. I hardly ever see, like, we always jokes about how Black Twitter will save a TV show and bring it to the, pop culture lexicon, which is true. But I don't see that happening with the Arrowverse shows, and because no one even knows they're out there. So it's like they're going to have to, at some point, step up their marketing game if they want these shows to do well. Batwoman, I'm loving it right now. I love the trio that's in the Batcave right now. I think they're awesome. But I don't ever see, other than like the one tweet that they send out from the main account that says Batwoman starting in 5 minutes. I mean, I never see anything. So how are people supposed to know that it's there and know what's happening to really get involved and watch it? So that's why I think it's not doing well.
No, so a comment on Black Woman. I said Black Woman. Batwoman. Sorry, that's kind of what it is. If only they had cast the person who plays Kate Kane in this season, in the first season, the show would have been 10 times better. Yeah, I just got to say that. That's one thing. But going to Black Lightning,
I'm glad you said that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and for Black Lightning, it was kind of heavy. I think that's why I kind of fell off of it. And I have to admit, I think the thing I hated the most about Black Lightning, I hated the disrespect from the oldest daughter to the dad. That's the thing. It just put me off because every single time
I like Thunder.
She'd pop off, make a mistake, get people hurt, put people in jeopardy, and she was never called out for it. And after a while, just like, I can't deal with this anymore. It's like, I don't want to get, because it made me not like the show, because I'm just like, dude, she's been a superhero for 2 seconds, and she thinks she knows everything.
It's funny, Cece, because I didn't like the youngest daughter. I thought she was a damsel in distress with a knife. And I'm just like, you got all this superpower. Why you
exactly.
Yes. I'm sorry, but then
I'm like, girl, give me those powers.
And here's another thing. And here's another thing I wanted to add in too. And this is like, again, I think this is the problem. What happens when you have sometimes somebody who takes on a legacy character's mantle is that, and this is something that will sometimes turn off some longtime readers or viewers who would be totally open to somebody of color coming in. But I think, or even, a woman coming in or someone of color coming in. But when you make it like, oh, well, this person, now that they have the mantle, they're better than them. And they almost use that legacy character to stand on the person's shoulders. That's a huge turnoff.
Yes.
And I've noticed that with Supergirl. They did that all the time with Supergirl. I didn't watch Batwoman season 2. I kind of gave up in that's season 1. But they did that so much with Supergirl. And people are just like, really? That's Superman. Superman is the reason why they're even superheroes. And you're disrespecting his name? Come on. And I think that you have to do it in a way where it's just like, hey, you respect the old, but you make sure the new gets a chance to shine. Like Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai is the best example of this, even though it's not a superhero show. It might as well be. But it's like, that's the way you respect the legacy characters, but you introduce and you let the new characters shine. You let them blaze their own path. You don't have to stand on the shoulders and trample down on the legacy characters just to make the new characters look good. That's a problem that I see a lot when you have these legacy characters come in. And that's what gets like readers really angry, because they're just like, dude, they're just disrespecting what came before. And it's like, you have to have that balance when you have these legacy characters, especially when they're a person of color.
And not only that, but they're disrespecting the reason why I came here in the first place.
Yes.
And if you're going to disrespect that, because all of this is about identity politics. Let's just be honest about this. So if you're sitting up there dogging them, you're dogging me, I don't want to curse,
The
but
ancestors.
that's what that is. And also, I have a little of a different take on the CW. They're like the rapid release of superhero shows, superhero media, because they'll put out just about anything, and I'm glad for it.
Yeah,
they will put out some risky stuff, and let me tell you the truth. With Arrow, I would have paid all my money and your money to go and slap Laurel just once.
Oh
Yeah.
Lord.
And
All right, Christian. Let's get back on. Let's get back on track.
We're gonna make it back on track. But the way that goes back to this is that all these shows have that small little collection of fans, and the way they failed, many of them, was not connecting to their fans. Not going out there themselves and getting folks, because if y'all remember Into the Badlands or
I love that show. I love the first season of that show.
The biggest problem with these shows. The biggest problem with these shows is like, you look at Black Panther. Ike Perlmutter, who was in charge of Disney, he was blocking it, and it took the DCEU with a more diverse a catalog of superhero films. That's what made Black Panther happen. Black Lightning, it had the greatest debut rating since The Flash, which was unprecedented. They never gave the push. Cassandra Cain, when she was Batgirl, she outsold Catwoman, Aquaman. Her last issue outsold Stephanie Brown's. So even when they do outperform, you still have to deal with racist, white, straight bigots who don't want to see these characters shine. So that's the other thing. You got to put pressure on them.
Right.
That's
or you know what? Or just make your own stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, 1 second, because we got to get to questions to the audience. But I want to ask you guys one more question, because we started to get kind of heated there. And so my last question is, when you're in groups, because I find myself in a myriad of different groups, and sometimes in the groups, the discussions about BIPOC characters in Marvel and DC, sometimes they're appropriate and enlightening. Sometimes they're just straight up fights where people like have to be put out of the groups. And in some of the major groups, sometimes it's just ignored. It's like people just scroll. It's like, oh no, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about that because it's too much, right? So I just wonder, do you guys, can everyone just give like one tip for how they navigate these spaces? Because we need to keep the discussions going in a forward motion, but in a positive and helpful way.
I avoid them. Sorry. I avoid the spaces now. It's just like sometimes, especially now in social media, it's like things get so heated. You talk at people instead of to like having a conversation. So like a lot of times I just avoid them. I'll have like individual conversations or maybe small groups, but usually not those big forums, because I'm just like, it's just toxic energy.
I'm with you, Susie, too, because sometimes self-care is not reading the comments, because I can go down there and do all of my emotional labor to educate some person and to race and ethnicity and representation and why does it matter and why isn't enough, because we're barely getting started. And at the end, it's just so exhausting. It's like people don't want to learn. They're not in the internet to learn, but maybe if face to face, it might be different. I don't know.
I absolutely do not. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was going to say, like, conversations like this one might be our best tool, right?
Okay. I don't deal with them. I absolutely do not deal with them. If they come into my space with that, I tell them why they're wrong, what they should consider, and then if they continue, I block them. If I'm in somebody else's spaces, I say my piece. And if somebody wants to have an actual conversation, we do. If someone just wants to bluster, I tell them, you're blustering, I'm not talking to you anymore. And then I go and I create the characters that I want to see in my media.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's about doing a J.R.R. Tolkien, writing the stories that you would like to read.
Yes.
That's what he did with Lord of the Rings.
Let me hear Krista's tip.
Kind of the same. I don't argue with people on the internet. Like, if you're a stranger, I don't owe you any of my time. I'm not here to educate you. That's not my thing. I'm not a teacher anymore. I retired from that years ago. So what I do is I will go ahead and I like to be positive and share what's out there. So, like, I will be on there tweeting about how much I love Batwoman. I will get on there and I will tweet about how much I love Black Panther. And I will share everything. I will share what I can and do my part to expose people. And so that way, when people come and ask me, oh yeah, let me tell you about all this. Cause I will, if I've got something joyous to share, I will share it. Like, my Twitter feed is just ridiculous because that's what I do all the time. I'm always sharing stuff that I'm interested in. So that's what I feel is important, is to bring awareness, because I know how hard it can be to find and gain access to those things, because if they're not marketed, like if they don't have the entire big budget of something behind it, people are not going to be aware. And I know that I'm just a regular lazy consumer, so it's hard for me, even myself, to come across those things. So when I do come across it, when I do find it, I try to do my part in presenting it. That's what I feel is important for me to do, is to present so that people can find it and see that I'm enjoying it and enjoy it as well. And if people come to me and they want to know more about it, then I'm going to share. If someone comes to me and they want to talk nonsense, I just don't even respond, because you're not, if they're already in that mindset, you're not going to change their mind. If you're in a panel, if this was a panel on diversity and there were the type of people who want to be on there just to argue, you're not going to change their mind. It's just really just a waste of your time. You're just going to make yourself mad, and they're going to go away feeling like they won something because they were able to upset you. And I'm not going to do that ever. So it's just really, I just try to present what I can, and that's what I do to bring diversity to people who might not be aware of it.
So just sharing positively. I think, Denny, did you have something that you wanted to share? One tip?
Yeah. For me, I think what Krista does is anything with marginalized media that I think is positive or progressive, I try to boost the signal on it and try to promote it. Any indie creators, Alicia, you know this, anytime someone's doing something, I try to promote their work, like, hey, let's go support them. Let's check this out too. I don't argue with people. My thing is, it's like, but even when it's like with friends, someone will come on and try to explain to me how comic books work. But then occasionally I get that one jerk. Occasionally I get that one.
You just did.
Yeah. And occasionally I get that one jerk. Go ahead. I get that one jerk who won't take no for an answer, will be a complete jerk. So then I just screenshot their comments and then send it to their employer, and they tend not to bother me after that.
Plain. Oh God.
Hey,
that is the best. That is the best.
You're gonna do what you're gonna do.
I've done it.
Oh Lord. Oh my word. Oh Denny.
Job.
All right. So we've got a couple of questions in the chat window here. It says, as a white author who wants diversity in their novels, how do I approach this without making a token character? And also, are there any situations as a white author I should steer clear of?
I have an answer for this. There's a great book on this called Writing the Other. And I particularly used it to write my African-American characters, because I by no means have that perspective. And they basically help you put yourself into any sort of different situation and kind of approach that, writing that character. You can also always use interview people. You can interview, there's a lot of people that are more than willing to help you write an authentic BIPOC character, and use sensitivity readers. You're going to make mistakes, and that's fine, but use your sensitivity readers, use your editors, and that should be good to help you. I mean, don't expect to be perfect, and if you do make a mistake, own it and move on.
Yeah, and I love that, Michelle. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah,
and also I think just another thing, just do research. Do research, find out some things, like find out traditions. That's what I did. You know, I'm not Pacific Islander, so I wanted to make sure I was getting something authentic. And even there was a best friend who's Korean, and he was in love with a Japanese girl.
So I kind of had a conversation with a friend and a coworker who was Korean. I was like, hey, are there any landmines I should avoid here? And he brought up, yeah, there's, even though there's not open hostility, there's still some history from World War II. And I was like, oh, okay. So I made sure that was kind of not like projected like a megaphone, but it was still kind of there in the writing. It was still kind of there in the story, like, hey, this is something I need to worry about. So it's just like talking to people, like she said, doing interviews, talking to fellow authors who are people of color, talking to your friends. If not, grow your friendship circle, not just for that reason, but grow your friendship circle anyway. And just doing research, finding out little sayings, finding out some of the slang, things that they might call each other if the parents of one character are immigrants, just finding out the little kind of the nuances, watching movies, seeing things here and there, kind of immersing yourself in that culture to a degree so you can really get into that mindset and put it into your story.
I want to jump in, CC, because we're running out of time. Before you even start on that character, ask yourself, why do I want this character in my story? Because if you're just putting it in the story so there is something other than white in it, they will become a token no matter what you do. Figure out why this person of this ethnicity is important to your story. In my books in the Shaman States of America, the woman, the reason why the Native Americans are I study a lot of Native American tribes is because it takes place on their land. And the monster hunting that they do go take on different traditions because they have a centuries old tradition and culture, and it will look different, and their leadership when they do that looks different. And what is it about that is different, which is what I explore, and how that affects when they butt up against the traditional Shaman States government, perceived as white. You have to think about your motivations and putting any ethnicity in your story. If you can't come up with a good reason, do some research and find a good reason and then work from there. Because once again, it will address and it will speak to the motivations, the powers they have, why they do it. Start there.
I like that.
Right.
Yeah. And
so I just want to say this one thing because we got to go.
Okay.
But the only thing that I would suggest that people not do is don't put all your people of color as the bad guys or as the negatives, right? That is a problem. So you really have to keep it balanced. Okay, but we have to close up because we only have like maybe 1 or 2 minutes left. So let's start with Denny. You want to tell people where they can find you?
Yes, my blog is dennisupkins.wordpress.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Denny Upkins, Twitter, Dr. Upkins, and on Instagram as well.
Very good.
As Denny Upkins.
CC, where can people find you?
You can find me. You can find my website at ccekeke.com. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at ccekeke.com, and you can find all my books on Amazon in the Kindle store.
Krista, where can people find you?
Me? Oh, hi, I'm Krista Tomlinson again, and my website is Krista Tomlinson. I'm on Twitter as Krista T Romance. That's where I hang out online most often. And my first book in the superhero series, Blaze, is available on Amazon in KU if you're a digital reader.
Very cool. Christian, where can people find you?
ShamanStates.com, ShamanStates.com. And I am Shaman States on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, where you usually find me, and on TikTok, as well as Sugar Evil. And for the comics, Constant Hustle Comics. Make sure you have the comics there.com about Eviction Bellium. And follow me there. Have some fun. See you there.
And Marvelous Michelle, where can they find you?
I like that, Marvelous Michelle. People can find me on social media, Instagram and Facebook, and Goodreads at Michelle Monares, Michelle Monares author. Monares is MONARREZ. And my website as well, michellemonares.com. And my books can be bought anywhere you bought your books, IndieBound, Amazon, BNA, anywhere.
All right, guys, and I'm author Alicia McCullough. You can find me at www.aliciamccullough.com. You can buy your books direct from me, or you can buy them at any retailers. All right, that's it. Thanks, guys, for hanging out with us for this really cool discussion. And don't forget to continue the discussion on Discord. Have a great evening.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.